Welcome back to another new episode of the Coatings Pro interview series. As always, I'm your host, Ben Dubose, news editor with the AMP Publications team. Today, we're going to be talking about abrasive blasting, and to do that, I'm joined today by Brandon Acker, president of Titan Abrasive Systems. Brandon, thank you so much for taking the time. How are you?
Great, Ben. How are you?
Doing well, no complaints. Glad to have you back on the program. We had you on the show a few years ago, but we've had a little bit of a gap since then. So I think it's a good time to talk about what's different in 2026, some of the recent market changes, and we'll get to a few industry talking points today. But before that, why don't you start with just a little bit of bio on yourself and your role with Titan? Just explain the path that's led you to today.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me back on. As you mentioned, I'm president of Titan Abrasive Systems. We are an original equipment manufacturer of abrasive air blast equipment or sandblasting equipment. We make blast rooms, blast cabinets, dust collection systems, reclamation systems, all made in the United States, right here in Pennsylvania. And we've been in business since 1953.
So when folks look at the cost of abrasive blasting, the typical focus is on things like labor, media, equipment, but there's other areas of the process as well. So in 2026, where are companies losing money when they're not even necessarily realizing it?
Yeah, you're right. Usually people focus on the obvious, the labor, the media, the equipment, especially the equipment because it's expensive. But the really where you lose money are the hidden costs, the inefficiencies that you can lose in a blast operation. Some of it can be, improper blasting, which leads to coating failures, which would then, lead to rework of equipment. So you're now having to blast something again, do it all over, which can be very expensive. Just inefficiencies of the blasting operation, using the wrong nozzles, or worn nozzles, inconsistent media flows, um, improper dust collection, all can lead to slow down your operation. They can lead to bottlenecks where you're backing up. Like if you have a coating process, they're backing that up because you're not running efficiently. Wasting media, poor maintenance of the equipment, hoses, nozzles, filters, and dust collection systems all can add up. It's all the small things, even wasted energy in your compressed air system. Compressors are expensive to run. If you have small leaks, it doesn't sound like much, but a lot of little leaks in a system are pretty much just leaking away profits, which
Yeah,
can add up. It doesn't sound like a big thing, but all these little things, when they combine, add up to a lot of profits that you're wasting.
100%. And I wanted to start with the economic angle because I think for a lot of people out there, cost pressures are more prevalent today than ever before. So I think in terms of what's new in 2026, exploring some of the economic angles is especially important. As
Yes.
far as the processes themselves, let's start with surface prep because at the end of the day, at Coatings Pro, we cover the application of coatings to steel, concrete, and roof substrates. And ultimately, a coating is only going to perform as well as it's applied. And the application often comes down to surface prep. You can have the right technologies, and if the surface isn't prepared to receive and accept that new coating system, then it's not going to work as intended. So let's look at surface prep specifically. How can some of, what might initially look like small issues in blasting ultimately become much larger problems when you get to the end stage application of a new coating system?
So yeah, you're right. The It's the coating that gets the spotlight, not the surface prep. Surface prep is something that's very important, but kind of goes by the wayside because people don't see it. You don't notice it. It's kind of the hidden aspect of coatings. But without that proper surface prep, and it could be very, very costly. In that, if, like you said, if that surface isn't prepared properly, usually it's according to the specs on the coatings, and if you don't have that proper, anchor profile on there for the coating to adhere to, it's going to lead to premature failures of that coating. Either can be if it's not blasted properly, if it's like a marine coating and you're redoing something and blasting it, you don't get all the rust off. There's small like micro pockets of rust underneath that coating, which can lead to small failures, which then more moisture gets into that small failure and just intensifies over time. And fails if it's just even new products we see new steel people are blasting for a coating. If you don't get that proper anchor on there, there's nothing for the coating to grab onto and to stick, so it causes the eventually the coating to fail, to fall off. We've even seen it, with things that we've purchased other equipment, that things that have been powder coated that come in and we can tell it doesn't, what wasn't properly prepared for that coating. A lot of people will just put it through, a wash system, which does a good job of cleaning it, but leaves that metal surface very smooth, and there's just nothing for the coating to grab onto. And it just, especially around edges, small edges, and it just causes that, especially with powder coating. Powder coating's bad because it falls off like in chunks. Once a little piece comes off, and then a big chunk of it comes off. So it's really, really important part to get the preparation done, and the proper preparation, that you're matching the profile that the coating calls out, that you're not too little of a profile that the coating's not going to hear right, or too deep of a profile that you're having to use a tremendous amount of coating to cover it. Either way, you just got to hit the magic number. So it's a very, very important part of it.
Sticking with the theme of jobs out in the field or in the shop, I guess, what are some of the productivity killers that you see in blasting operations today? What are some of the things that maybe surprise contractors or applicators the most when they're ultimately able to fix them?
Blasting equipment's tricky because surface preparation, abrasive blasting equipment is, just the nature of the beast. It's self-destructive, so it wears. Because if you think about what it's doing to the surface of steel, preparing it, profiling it, it's doing the same thing to anywhere that media. Once it hits the airstream and is propelled, it's going to wear anything downstream from that. Your hoses, your couplings, your nozzles are all going to wear quickly. So I think it's surprising to people how quickly that happens, and the amount of maintenance that you have to do to it, and just to stay on top of it and be aware of that, especially with like nozzles. We get a lot of people that run a nozzle, probably surprised at, depending on the media you're using, how quickly a nozzle can wear out. And I think people they're thinking they're getting, well, we can stretch it. We can save money rather than buy another $150 nozzle. We can stretch it, and keep using it and using it, thinking you're saving money, thinking you're saving the $150, when really now your performance is, a fraction of what it was before. So you're, instead of blasting something that's taking you 10 minutes to blast, it's taking you 30 minutes. So in the long run, the cost is way more than the cost of the part or the maintenance piece to keep the system, at its peak performance. So I think a nozzles wear is probably pretty shocking to people, and how quick things can wear out and how you have to stay on top of them. Another one is probably media, incorrect media that surprises people. People try to reuse media that's not reusable media, and thinking they can reuse it, but they're not. You're kind of blasting with a mix of media and, dust, which is going to just, it works, but it's just cutting that. If you don't keep track of your time, it's going to cut that performance and the time it takes you to blast something double, triple the time. So it's really that's going to eat into profits.
Yeah, you mentioned the economic angle. So when we talk about these inefficiencies in the blasting process, what are the ways that those can be improved? What are some of the solutions for companies that maybe they are meeting their production goals, but they're still struggling with profitability and the economic side? What are some of the solutions to address any of those inefficiencies that you just described?
Keeping on top of your equipment, maintaining it, putting probably a program in place that keep your operators trained, get good operator training so that they know what they're doing. They're familiar with the equipment. They're not just in there blasting. Like here, you just hold the hose and blast away. If they understand how the system works and what wears, then they can keep an eye out on it, have a good maintenance team behind it, and maybe put together, some sort of like performance metrics that on your products, what's track your cycle times, your media usage, and develop a like a standardized process that every operator will go in there and they know they can apply that same thing, and you can track it. You can say, hey, we're blasting these parts. They should take this long to blast. If it's taking you 10 minutes to blast it, and then a week later it's taking the guy 20 minutes, you know something's wrong there. Something needs to be addressed. So having that. Having the metrics in place and a process that can be monitored and applied for, the blasting. The blasting's rough work, so it's one that has high turnover rates on the actual blast operators. So you want to make sure you have a process in place that can be applied for other. You have another guy come in or someone's off, someone else is filling in for them. They can keep that process running smoothly.
You mentioned blast media a couple of minutes ago, and oftentimes that can get looked at as a minor expense, but ultimately those so-called minor expenses can add up when we talk about the overall economics of a project. So when it comes to media usage and recovery, what are some of the things that contractors and applicators can do better? What are some of the steps they can take to be more efficient with their blast media?
First, I'd say make sure you're using the correct media for your application. Media's changed quite a bit now. There's engineered products out there. There's just a lot more on the market than there was a while ago. Make sure you're choosing the proper media for your substrate, and for your coating, what you're trying to achieve. Once you dial in the correct media, you want to make sure your settings are right on your regulators, your abrasive regulators. Check that you're using the proper amount of media. Some people, if you're new to it, a lot of people think when you're blasting, you're going to see this, stream of media coming out the end that you can see coming out the hose, which is not the case. Usually, it's mostly air with just a very small amount of media mixed in there that will do the job. If you have those regulators open too much, you're just wasting it, using a lot of media and wasting it. The other thing would be reclaiming that media. Make sure you have, if you're going to use reclaimable media, make sure you have a reclamation system rather than just use the media and sweeping it up and shoveling it back into the blaster is not the way to do it. It'll work, but it won't work efficiently. So if you have a good media reclamation system, it will do a good job. It'll speed everything up. It'll get that media recovery. It'll clean it, make sure it gets out any of the fines, the particles, the debris, and keeps your good usable media. Will just make a much better process and much quicker.
We've talked about job site efficiency and making projects run as they should. We've talked about the overall economics and the importance of making the right blasting choices and getting profitability to where it needs to be. But there's also a safety component to this. So I'm curious your perspective on how blasting efficiency relates to safety. What are some of the risks that maybe a contractor or applicator overlooks when processes aren't running the way that maybe they should?
Yeah, inefficiencies can definitely affect safety, the safety of the operators in there. One would be not, lack of maintenance. Your dust collection system, if it's not functioning properly, it's not, most collection systems now are reverse pulse filter. So it should be cleaning itself. If your dust collection systems aren't functioning properly or not doing a good job cleaning, or you're not changing filters properly, you're going to have a dusty environment for the operator. So he won't be able to see, which is not good. He's not going to see what he's doing. So you're not going to get the good performance because he won't be able to see, the surface and the profile and what he's doing. Plus, it becomes a hazard in that the visibility in there is not good. So now you can't see where you're walking and moving. Filters, other filters, breathing air filters are very important to change. That's the air, feeding the operator's helmet. You want to make sure he has, clean, good, nice breathing air, and all that the lighting, proper lighting, if all that's maintained, you want to keep that clean environment that he's blasting in so you don't have, trip hazards. It gets slippery in there with the media, big, heavy hoses. All that adds up, and you want to make sure it's, like I said, it's a strenuous job blasting, and you want to make sure it's everything's maintained and in the best working condition for that operator to minimize any safety concerns or issues that might come up.
And finally, to bring this home, if any of our listeners are inspired and they want to, starting tomorrow, improve their blasting operations, what do you see as the most practical change that could make an immediate impact in terms of bang for your buck? If somebody listening wants to go out and improve their processes starting tomorrow, what's the best place to start?
I'd say the best place is making sure your operators are trained and get in some sort of metrics in there and a process. Develop a standardized process that the efficiencies and what times it should take and what's getting done. The time should be getting coded and that process is functioning that it can pass on to other people. I think if you really track that, it will. That's the key to spotting those inefficiencies. You have to have that process in place that how long something should take to get blasted, and then you'll be able to tell if it's not getting done at that speed. Then you know what to look for.
Really great insight from Brandon Acker, president of Titan Abrasive Systems. Brandon, for anyone listening who might want to learn more from Titan, from you, or simply just get more information, what's the best way that they can do that? I'm guessing it's website and social media. Any plugs you'd like to toss out?
Yep, probably the best ways are our website. We're just titanabrasive.com. Abrasive is singular, no S on the end. Phone numbers on there. They can email us, call us. We are obviously on social media as well. You can find us on LinkedIn. Is probably the best place, but our website's probably the best place. A lot of information on there. We have a big resources section that has a lot of good articles on there about maintaining equipment, compressor sizing things, a lot of information on there, and it's all searchable.
Good stuff. Folks, that's Brandon Acker. Brandon purchased Titan Abrasive from his uncle back in 2013 after spending 5 years at Titan learning the ins and outs of the business. Since then, you've been completely redesigning and upgrading the product line, and now as president, you're in charge of overseeing the design and manufacturing of the complete line of blast room and blast machine products for industrial use. One other plug we should toss out, I think you guys use made in the USA components for the blasting equipment, correct?
We do, yes.
Why is that
Uh,
so important? I'm thinking, you had a few years ago the supply chain crisis. Does that make it even more important to have that local connection?
it does, and we were fortunate enough to have that crystal ball that we did this in advance of the whole COVID and the supply chain issues, or where we went, made in the USA, where we brought everything in, and it was very apparent during that time. We did not have those supply chain issues, which was a huge help for us. Unfortunately, it slowed everything down in the world, but it definitely it became very very obvious that was a good choice for us to be made in the USA and source as many components as we can from locally. Really saved us time and continues to do so. There's still supply chain interruptions now, and we don't experience them. The tariffs, all of that, we're kind of for the most part immune to it.
Yeah, and I'm sure it makes you guys a more reliable partner for your contractors and applicators out in the field that use your products. Brandon, thank you so much for the time today. I guess this is where we'll wrap. On behalf of Brandon Acker of Titan Abrasive, I'm Ben Dubose, news editor with the AMP Publications team. If you want more resources from us, you can just go to coatingspromag.com or amp.org, ampp.org. Coatings Pro is a member magazine of AMP, the Association for Materials Protection and Performance. You can also follow Coatings Pro or AMP on your social media outlet of choice, LinkedIn, Twitter/X, Facebook, Instagram. We're available across all of those and beyond. Just search for Coatings Pro Magazine or AMP. And then as far as Titan Abrasive, Brandon mentioned that a few minutes ago, just titanabrasive.com. All right, for today, I think we're done. Brandon, thank you so much for joining us. And thanks to all of you listening for, again, tuning in. And please come back soon for more new episodes from the Coatings Pro interview series.